returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
Welcome back to Retro Wednesday at the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike, and today I want to talk to you about the 1979 Mego Buck Rogers toy line, the entire toy line, everything in it. Everything is here to talk about. We're going to discuss this. Now, there are 9 figures, 4 vehicles, 1 playset that's not really a playset, more of a diorama piece, very fragile. We're going to talk about that. But we're going to get into talking about this, everything with this, a little bit about the show for the 1979 Mego Buck Rogers toy line. Coming up. I remember watching the show back in the day, and I thought it was an enjoyable, fun show, and I really couldn't tell if they were trying to target adults or kids. As a kid, I felt like it was too adult, and as an adult, I feel like there's a lot of stuff they kind of threw in for the kids, but they were trying to probably target both markets with that. But for the most part, this toy line is based on a TV show that's a little bit above kids' heads. Starting out with the Buck Rogers figure, this is the 1978 Mattel Battlestar Galactica, which is a different toy line and a different company, but then this is of the same year, I believe, the Black Hole figures. And they did a lot of sharing of stuff with Black Hole, such as the body of this is very similar, and then they also reused one of the vehicles. But I do want to point out that these are G.I. Joe type construction, and here we go with these, which are more like Star Wars figures. And so Mattel was trying to match Star Wars. They were trying to go the new direction with G.I. Joe before G.I. Joe, by the way. But pretty cool overall. We're going to get into looking at all these other toy lines in the future, probably pretty soon. So there's not really a whole lot to say that's different than the actual Joe figures, but you got the head movement in here, and you have the articulation in the shoulder, and you do have a straight arm. So it's not up to the swivel yet. So this is pre-swivel, and you do have this kind of a sticker with a rainbow sticker, and that's on the side there. You do have this gun. The gun is not, it's glued on, not removable, but I happen to have one that can be removed. But they don't have, it won't fit in the hand. You'd break that thumb for sure. And it's not supposed to be removed, but they really should have had an accessory. And the clip-in is cool. If they had a clip-in like that, I would have been A-okay, and he was able to hold it. That would have been pretty cool overall. And then we do have all the same other construction as G.I. Joe down below. But with that, kind of a simple figure. I did notice that there's like belt buckles on here, something along those lines, and he's got a collar and a belt and another strap over here. But for the most part, pretty simple and plain looking figure overall, and I kind of think that you could get several and just have them as background characters, because so many characters wore the same costume. Speaking of the same costume, this is Wilma Deering, and she is in the same costume, but a uniform, I would say. Now, I want to point out that with this figure, you almost always see the tip broken off on almost all these figures. I do have one somewhere that still has the tip of it, but I do need to kind of kit bash together my best version. I, oddly enough, have not done that yet, so it's something that I need to do down the road. But still, this figure feels a lot like the Buck Rogers figure, except just a slimmer version. It does have a different waist, and it is a different construction. It's a different figure, but overall, looks like the same figure with a different head. And her head is giant because of the hair. But the actress that played this was quite attractive, but the face sculpt on this is not attractive. That's another thing, is that there's no paint for the eyes or facial features or anything like that, which they really should have done, but they did not do that. That kind of sucks. But for this, these figures are probably the most sought after, aside from Twiggy, the Wilma Deering. And this was the first figure I had for this toy line, and that's kind of why I kind of like this figure. I had her for years. Next up, we got Twiggy, and I actually forget the name of what the sticker is. The sticker is a name. There's a whole character on there, and I was just watching the first episode, and I was like, oh, I want to know all this stuff, and I kind of forgot it. It does look kind of cool. He's very small. Let's just say in comparison to a Buck Rogers figure. That's how small he is, and that's how small he's supposed to be. But when I first picked one of these up, I was shocked how small he was. But he does look pretty good. Interesting. He does have articulation at the elbow, and the waist does that stuff, and then knees, and the head moves side to side. That's about it for this guy. There's not much to him. Really hard to get them with that sticker in good condition. That was really hard to track down. But anyway, Twiggy, a good looking, fun little figure. I think there's like one that's a wind up walker. Wouldn't mind picking one of those up one day. But I think this is definitely a very sought after figure in the toy line also. Next up we have Draco, and the fact they use kind of a cloth cape, it splinters off a little bit instead of the vinyl would rip, but it have a sharp edge. This kind of splinters off a little bit, and the cape is kind of the hardest part to get on him. You see him without his cape a lot. But still, I have friends, when I was telling them about the Buck Rogers and asked them if they had anything, were telling me that like 5 years ago, they were finding them carded for $10. And now they're a little more, they're not really the most expensive toy line out there. But this is the one that comes to everyone's mind, and they're like, yeah, you can get one for like $10. But even he goes for a little higher than that these days. But he's a pretty cool looking figure. He is sort of plain, but I kind of get the whole Jedi vibe out of him, even though he's not a Jedi. He's far from it. But yeah, still pretty cool overall. And I do kind of like this cape. I wished it was vinyl though, but yeah, he's kind of boring. Next, we're getting to the Draconian Guard, and he's a pretty cool figure overall. He's got, this is another one have had for a long time, but I had him in pieces, and I never put them together, and I didn't even realize he was from Buck Rogers. I just had him in a G.I. Joe container for 15 years or something, and I was like, oh, we put a rubber band in them and see what's going on with them. But I had a handful of these. This one and Draco I had before I started trying to really go after the line. And yeah, he looks okay. He's got the gun on the side. It looks a little different than the ones that they have, and it's all black instead of white and black. And of course, it doesn't come off. Which, if they were made, they're separately glued on. But if they were made to be removable, like that was a feature, those would be missing off of almost every figure. And has this ginormous helmet. He's got this yellow kind of sash on the chest piece there. But I do want to point out that there is a variant of this that has yellow, a different yellow. Now, I don't know if it's faded or worn, but I see consistently some different yellows, and I'm not really sure what's going on with all that. Maybe somebody touched one of them up to make it look good. I don't know. But maybe it's a variant. Maybe it's just my luck. I don't know. But still, the Draconian Guard. I want to call him the Marauder pilot because it kind of feels like what he is. Next up, we have Princess Ardella, and yes, she is a real princess. That's what he asked her. I think that she should have been a different. They should have used a different outfit or costume for her than this one, but this is what they chose. Maybe they chose this one. Well, it was the 70s. They liked to have fun back in the day, but maybe it's because they just didn't want all of the bad guys to have the same coloration. I mean, her other costume would have put her looking closer to this. And maybe it was smart to give her something a little bit different. But then she kind of is leaning close to this. I don't know. Anyhow, she does have these little horns up here. And that was on her hat. She shows her hair. And then going on down. She almost feels like a genie. Like I Dream a Genie figure is the way she looks. And then there is a lot of line work and stuff all in here that you can see on the chest and all that. But anyway, it's a cool looking figure overall. It's okay. It's fun to get her. But with no accessories and as big of a role as she played, I just thought that maybe she should have had a different costume. Next up, we get into Tiger Man, which is another missed opportunity in my opinion. I think that he should have had accessories and he would have been like the coolest figure. He would have been there Snake Eyes or Storm Shadow or something. Looking at he's even got the strap, right, to hold his sword, but he doesn't have one. But he's still a cool looking figure. Actually, out of all of them, he's probably one of the coolest looking figures that doesn't make sense unless you watch the show, of course, but he was way bigger than the rest of the figures. So he's too short. I mean, he should have been on a larger buck. And since they made the whole figure itself, I mean, they could have made a little bit larger buck to have supported him. He does have some tattoos or something on his head, and I think he's a pretty cool looking figure overall. He's got the tiger stripes on the pants. It really does match the character more or less for the most part for the time. I mean, today it would match like exactly, but this was as close as we were going to expect to get from back in the day. And with that, Tiger Man looks pretty cool. Next up, we have Dr. Hewer, which is a very boring, bland figure overall, and it's one of those things that I don't think this thing sold very well at all. And some of these figures like this, they wouldn't have done well back then. They probably do really well nowadays, but back then, not very well at all. He does look kind of cool with the stripe on it, but everything else, it's just everything's lost. Any detail there is lost because it's all just very few paint apps and black. Maybe they just said, "Hey, we got to make up the money and make up with a cheap figure here, and just got to fill the line with cheap figures." But this one's a major disappointment, and the next one's an even bigger disappointment. Here is Killer Kane, which that's not the greatest pose you can put him in, but he's really boring. He's got this gold right here in the center, and of course the blue everywhere else, and a little bit of paint for the hands, and some coloration on the face. No eye dots and none of that kind of stuff. So really, really a boring figure, which is kind of cool because it makes them pretty easy to capture these two on the secondary market because nobody seems to care about them. So you can complete the line, but then you're like, why bother? Sometimes it was nice because they were cheap, and that's really the only positive I have to say about this. And I don't even feel like it really captured the character at all, but it works. I mean, it gets the job done to fill a slot. Killer Kane. All right, with the figures out of the way, we're going to get into the vehicles, and I got to say we're going to start with the flagship of all of them, and that is the Starfighter. And with this, it is a decent looking vehicle overall, and this is what people want the most. I think out of this toy line, this is what people are after the most, and I can see why, because it does look kind of cool, and it's a little confusing too, with the wings on the bottom, the way that works, and then we've got these laser gun kind of things in the front, and then jet engines in the back. Now there's a few things about this. First of all, the decals, if they're applied correctly, it looks really nice with the decals. This one is all original decals, and I gotta tell you, it was a challenge to get one of these 100% complete and original, but it's doable. Now here is these engines. One of the biggest problems is that these like to crack, and the way this is constructed is it's actually two shells, so top and bottom shell put together, screwed together, and then this and those pieces are put over the top as a secondary reinforcement. So they are also supposed to help hold this thing together. So if they're broken, of course, they're not doing their job. Really cool thruster sticker on the back, and that's what the thrusters look like. And then these wings here, these lower wings, they come in and out, so you can just slide them into here, like so. And then getting up here to the top, you have a cockpit, and it opens up. Now this is an aftermarket helmet that I got. That was pretty cool. But then you get the figures in there. There's not much going on inside this cockpit at all, really. And then you can close that down. So it doesn't do a whole lot. There's no features. There's no rocket firing missiles. The only feature that's the closest thing that I could call a feature is that it has this retractable landing gear, and it clips into place, holds fine. That's the only feature that I could actually call a feature on this. But still, I mean, it is cool looking for sitting on a shelf. For a kid playing with it, it's really fragile. It likes to break. And not very many examples are complete and unbroken. I do want to point out that the year before, Battlestar Galactica made their Viper, which is the most popular Battlestar Galactica piece. And with the Viper, it was too small. It was heavily underscaled. It had this tiny little pilot with it. And I'm going to show that toy line, but you can see pilot to pilot size. It just didn't work. But there are advantages to it being this small, and I will go over that when I make my video for Battlestar Galactica. But there are 3D printed ones that fit the full scale. And there it is. This is like a homemade creative thing, which is really cool, by the way. We'll talk more about that in the Battlestar Galactica video, but this is what I think they should have done. But there's pluses and minuses to making this thing this big. The next vehicle is the Draconian Marauder, and this one is another one that is sought after, and it has its own problems. But it is kind of cool, and it's hard to get complete, almost impossible to get complete on its own, without buying a few of them to kind of piece together one. We have problems with canopy, stickers. You can get reproduction stickers for these, which I try to keep these as original as possible. I don't care about reproduction, but if they already show up looking pretty okay, I'm going to be okay with that. This canopy breaks. I'm going to show you on another one. Here's the rear engines. This is supposed to have a piece that goes in, and I'm going to show that in a second too. On the bottom, the landing gear. These go in and out like so. So it has landing gear. These are the craziest landing gear I've ever seen in my life. And snaps into place. It makes a crazy sound too, so you feel like you're going to break something snapping them in place. And then this landing gear acts exactly the same as the one that we just saw, almost exactly the same as the one we saw with the Starfighter. But I'm going to bring in another one here. This one here. Is it that one? No, this one here. One of these to show how all this stuff breaks. So the rear engine has actually another piece that's supposed to go inside of this. This piece goes inside of that other piece that we had over here, which is strange, which I didn't know when I started collecting this. I was like, oh, that's another piece you got to track down. Snap that. And then the canopy, you open it up, and you have these pieces that break. And then these side support pieces, which I kind of try to fix one, kind of hold it in place. You put your pilot in here like so, and then you put your canopy, you close your canopy if you have it working. If you have non-broken canopies, all mine are broken, sadly. And then there we go, we got that on there. And even if those are broken, it still kind of holds in okay with the side pieces. So there's that. This thing is ultra fragile, and there's all kinds of breakage points on it. And I've restored them to a point, but I still wanted to keep them as original as possible. So I'm not going to push any further on restoring these. But it's one of those things that they just didn't make a whole lot of them, and I don't think they were popular back in the day. And the few that were made, most of them broke or the parts lost. So another reason this is a bit of a challenge to get. We have another Starfighter here, and this is the laser scope Starfighter. It is goofy as all get out and all heck, but it is also something that they repurposed for the black hole the same year, I guess. I don't remember, but this thing kind of goes in and out so that you can get sights on it. We're going to kind of look how it works. You have a canopy, opens up, closes. You can put a figure in there, and with that, you got all kinds of cool little decals here and there, and then you put batteries in here and here, and then you loose your figure out of the canopy. And it's electronic. Now, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to demonstrate it, but I'm only going to shoot the sound for a second. So just get ready. It's real loud, and it's going to be like a fraction of a second. And it shoots. Pretty loud. It's crazy and annoying. It's going to annoy everybody. And then also, you want to... let's see if I can angle this camera to where it's going to show what you can see in here. You can see how it reflects, and you can see the playset in here. And then you're shooting it. You're shooting... I'm kind of losing the figures in here, but yeah. That's how it's supposed to work. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it gets the job done and is really annoying. That's the Laser Scope Fighter. Let's look at the last one, the Land Rover. Next up, we're going to look at the kind of a freaky vehicle. It's the Land Rover, also called the Land Ram, and it is very interesting, actually. It's kind of a cool vehicle, and with it, it doesn't do a whole lot, but it was in one of the episodes, I think, and I think it could be repurposed for a whole lot of different space van things. It almost looks like this thing that was in Star Wars in the background in the, first Star Wars, the one that they renamed to A New Hope because for whatever reason. Now, first thing is it has working treads, so if you roll the treads, it does this, the old clicky of the 70s. And then the other thing, it has a laser gun at the top, right here, shoot, bang, bang, and it does its thing. These, I don't know what they call them, but they look like lights, but they're probably something else. Now, these, I believe, are solar panels to give it some sort of power from the solar panels. And then you have all kinds of decals of computer screens and stuff, and I've kind of re-taped down some of my decals here. This is all original, so it is missing a couple of decals. It is really hard to track all these parts down for original, but there's cool looking decals on it. It really does spice it up, especially the rims. That's kind of cool that they have the rim decals, and then you have computer stuff on the top. But I think it's supposed to have like things right here, and then somehow it's supposed to have another set of these either in the front somehow or on the bottom. And then you open this up and you're going to see that you have room for 3 figures in here, and they can go cruising around. But in the back of it, there's room to kind of put other stuff if you want. It was truly just wasted space, unengineered wasted space. I'm kind of glad they didn't engineer maybe a back door, because that thing would be missing too, and something else that's hard to track down. But the Land Ram, it is one of the rarer vehicles. So it is one of the harder ones to track down, especially getting the parts. But it is pretty cool overall. And then there was one in Battlestar Galactica that was similar to this, but it was made for the miniature scale. Lastly, we need to talk about the playset, which is more or less a diorama piece. I do want to point out that there are some things that are really cool on this picture, which is the prototype, that didn't carry over into the actual one. And you're going to see this seat here. There was like an extra back piece that clips into it that make it look more like a chair. And with that was kind of cool idea right there. The decals I think I like better for the actual decals, but the way the runway, they show this runway, and I'm going to show you on the back of this. I took that and I made it bigger. I just took a copy of that and made it bigger. I made my own runway because you have to cut it off the back. Moreover than cutting it off the back, because I checked, there's not a smaller strip I checked. This is really a silly looking runway. Like, I wouldn't even want to display that. And this is what the original one looked like in the picture. But then this is what we got, which sucks. And so that's the reason why most of them didn't get cut off, probably. All right, so now looking at this playset, it's a diorama, as I say. It's not a playset, really. But there's a couple of cool things about it. First of all, I love the sticker decals. They look fantastic. They pop, they look phenomenal, they look great, which is part of the reason I didn't fully restore this thing. I did a partial restoration and I restored a few pieces, and I'll show that here in a second. But one cool thing is that you can fit this starship underneath it. So that is cool too, and it's cool for display purposes also. I do love that. And then one of the other cool things about this is that you actually do have a kind of a control center. And what I didn't see on the box before, I didn't see this chair. So they added another built-in chair, and this is like 5 or 6 pieces clipped together. Like, that's a separate piece. This archway is a separate piece, and the whole back piece, it has to double side tape on, and that's just the way that is constructed and it works. And I don't want to move it around too much because I have put it together, but then we're going to get into this piece here. But like, you have this elevation piece here, but I like the fact that you can just kind of line up your figures on the rail and display them that way, however you want to display them. That is one thing I think is kind of cool. I do want to point out I did whiten this piece, and as you can see, the color difference between this and the whitened one is a massive difference. But the problem with restoring these is that getting these stickers off, you're probably going to mess them up. I tried to get a little bit of it off. You're probably going to mess these stickers up getting them off. And so with that, I'm just going to leave it the way it is and maybe find a better piece. Or if I found like a sticker sheet or something. But you could get reproduction stickers that are really close, really spot on. But if it's already original, why mess it up? But I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. The other couple of things, there are stairs over here that they could walk up, but they won't stand on them very well. So displaying them on those stairs is kind of tough. You could display something in this archway, and then you have computer panels here and here that you can look at. And then just a couple of other cool little decals on it. Really cool looking playset, but it's so fragile. It's made out of that same kind of stuff that the trays for action figure trays in the collector cases. So it feels very similar to that. And as you can see, a lot of those collector cases are cracked and broken. The only way I see that these survive in even presentable condition is if they've been kept in the box. And every one of them that's come along that looks like it's somewhat presentable has been kept in the box. The ones that weren't in the box there's a lot of issues with them. Well, there's a lot of issues with mine too. But anyway, this is the Starfighter, Starfighter Command Center. Pretty cool looking display and playset. Alright, so this is my look at the Buck Rogers Mego 1979 toy line. I think it is a pretty cool toy line to collect. It was sort of lame for back in the day. Couldn't compete with Star Wars. Couldn't compete with, definitely not G.I. Joe. But G.I. Joe wasn't around in 1979 in this form factor, in this scale. And so with that, it's hard to track down some of these pieces. Some of them are very easy to get and quite abundant. But overall, getting a whole collection will take a little bit of while. But there's stuff out there. And anyway, I'm curious if you had any of these back in the day when you were a kid. And I'm curious if anyone collects these today. And do you still have any of these from your childhood? Let me know in the comments below. It would be a whole lot of fun on this Retro Wednesday. Like and subscribe, and Tidarium Hanger out.
For that matter,
Pain, please.
he was frozen by a combination of gases: oxygen, cryogen, ozone, methylene. Almost.
Are you a real life princess?
Hey, babe, this is quite a setup.
It's Colonel Daring, Commander of Earth's Defenses.
I mean, you're in charge of all this?
That's right. Now there are no...
What is that?
This is Twiki, and this is Dr. Theophilus. Good morning, Dr. Theophilus. Lovely day.
Thank you. I did my best.
Theophilus.
Long before this time